My name is Morgan Ellis. I'm 34 years old, and today I'm walking into the kind of office where no one talks about what it took to get here. The receptionist greets me by name like she's known it for years, even though we've never met. I nod politely, shift the weight of my binder in my arms, and follow her through a hallway lined with glass doors and silence. On the other side of those doors are attorneys who don't flinch when betrayal is spelled out in line items and binding clauses. This place is quiet, efficient, sterile. It's not angry. It's not emotional. It's just the place where endings get notarized. They say some battles end in courtrooms. Mine ends in a conference room with air conditioning. I can feel through my blouse and coffee I won't drink. The receptionist opens the door, gestures me in, and I step inside. I set the binder down on the long oak table. It's black leather, not flashy, just heavy enough to make a sound when I release it. Inside is everything. I couldn't say out loud for the last 2 years. The original company sketch on a folded napkin. The domain name registered under my email address. The first 5 client contracts signed by me alone. I never needed to make noise. I kept proof. Across the room, my attorney Leland Grayson glances up from his notes. He offers a small nod, not quite a smile, and slides a packet toward me. It's the settlement agreement, finalized pending signature. His expression is unreadable, the kind you earn after years of watching families burn each other quietly. Ready, he asks. I look at the document. My name is printed neatly in the header, exactly where it should have been all along. Yeah, I say let's finish this. But before the pen hits paper, the story has to begin somewhere else. 3 years ago, I was standing in the back of a tiny co-working studio in Santa Monica, adjusting the lighting for a pop-up workshop. Avery and I had planned together. She was out front, smiling at attendees, shaking hands like she belonged on a panel. I stayed in the back, syncing the playlist, checking the speaker's water bottle, handing out branded tote bags we couldn't afford to print. We were still new, still hungry. I remember thinking, this is the beginning of something real. Avery had always been that way. The spotlight landed on her like it was looking for her. Even as kids, she was the one people remembered. I never minded. I liked being the one who made things run. She sparkled. I planned. It worked. Our first real client came through a friend of hers from college, a small boho brand looking for a creative overhaul. Avery pitched. I wrote the strategy. They hired us both, but the logo they approved, that was mine. I'd drawn it on a napkin while waiting for her at a diner. She'd laughed and said it looked too academic, but still emailed it the next day. When the client chose it, she never mentioned my name. That's how it started. A pattern. A soft pattern. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't obvious. She just forgot to include me. At first, it didn't matter. I handled contracts, invoices, client roadmaps, marketing funnels. Avery handled PR and the Instagram. She liked to say we were a perfect blend of form and function. What she meant was, I built the skeleton and she dressed it. And it worked for a while. Until it didn't. When Avery started dating Tyler, everything changed. He was charming with the kind of MBA polish that made people think he knew what he was talking about. He slid into meetings like he belonged there, took over branding discussions, tweaked the company pitch. I raised an eyebrow once, and Avery smiled too sweetly. Tyler's just helping out, she said. You've got the boring stuff down. Let him zhuzh it. Zhuzh it. That's what she called replacing our business cards with new ones that said Avery Ellis Creative in block font with a clean serif tagline Tyler had trademarked in his name. That's when I started saving things. Emails, drafts, dated screenshots, receipts. I didn't know what I'd do with them. I just knew they were taking something that wasn't theirs and smiling while they did it. Now in this room, I'm not smiling, but I'm not angry either. That part passed months ago. There's only the weight of knowing what it cost to get here. I reach for the pen. As I sign the final page, I think about that napkin. It's still inside the binder, worn faint with grease stains. It has 3 names on it. Our last names back when we were just dreaming. I remember the moment I drew it when Avery looked at it and said, "You're such a nerd. But maybe there's something here." There was everything. The assistant walks in with a copy of the signed document. Leland gathers the rest. "You'll receive transfer confirmation in 2 business days," he says. and a formal retraction from their attorney regarding brand use. They've agreed to pay a licensing fee for the prior year's misuse, plus the adjusted exit compensation. I nod. I won't be contesting the amount. He studies me for a second. You could, he says. You'd probably win. I know I say, but I already did. He nods, says nothing more, and begins packing up. As I leave the office, the sun has shifted. The streets are still loud, but inside, everything is quiet. I walk slowly, the binder tucked against my side. I'm not carrying evidence anymore. I'm just holding the part of myself they thought I would leave behind. But I didn't. Not this time, not ever again, and certainly not in silence. Avery and I grew up in a small town, nestled between the pines and the coast, where the summers were slow and the winters were heavy with rain. Our parents ran the Northbridge Community Center, a squat beige building that smelled like old linoleum and donated paperbacks. It was the kind of place where kids came to read when school was closed, where teens rehearsed bad theater and older neighbors dropped in for free coffee and tax prep. My parents were good people. They believed in service and showing up and letting others go first. But in our house, it was clear who was expected to lead. Avery. She was 2 years older, tall, golden-haired, with that kind of innate charisma that made teachers smile before she even opened her mouth. I was smaller, quieter, the kind of kid who memorized the after-school schedule and reshelved books in alphabetical order, even when no one asked. Avery could charm anyone, even when she was wrong. I just made sure the wrong didn't happen again. At family dinners, Avery would talk about whatever school committee she'd joined, or how she was redesigning the student newsletter. My parents would lean in, nod praise her initiative. I'd clear the plates, stack them neatly in the sink, and mention I'd raised our club's fundraising goal by 30%. That's great, my dad would say without looking up. Can you help Avery organize her bake sale next weekend? That's how it was. Not cruel, not even unkind, just consistent. By the time we hit our 20s, the dynamic hadn't changed much. Avery graduated with a communications degree and a minor in design. I earned mine in business strategy. We ended up back home briefly. She was freelancing for small brands. I was working at a consulting firm in Portland, the kind that eats young analysts alive. It was Avery who brought up the idea of starting something together. We could call it Ellis and Avery, she said one night over pad thai on my apartment floor, or maybe something cooler like E&A Collective. We'd plan pop-ups, do rebrands for small shops' weddings if we have to. I remember setting down my chopsticks and feeling that strange flutter, the one you get when you sense a door cracking open. I could handle vendor relations, I said slowly. Budgets, strategy systems. And I'd do visuals, branding, client experience, she said, already reaching for my laptop. Let's mock up a site. That was the night it began. We split a bottle of wine and stayed up until 3:00 a.m., drafting a name list, sketching mood boards. Avery had the ideas, but I built the bones. I created a scheduling system, wrote a pricing matrix, even filed the business registration the next morning. I still have the receipt. Our first client was a neighbor who ran a struggling florist shop. Avery did the logo redesign. I rebuilt her supply chain. Within 6 months, she'd doubled her revenue. We framed the thank you card she sent us. Avery hung it above her desk. I kept the empty gift box from the project, tiny velvet-lined packaging with our first ever check inside. It's still in my closet. The business grew fast. What started as weekend side work turned into a full-time operation. We booked a holiday market downtown. Then a boutique skincare brand hired us for a full rebrand. Avery got us on a local business podcast. She handled interviews like she was born with a mic in her hand. I stayed behind the camera. I built a custom CRM system, standardized our vendor contracts, and launched a referral network that brought in half our revenue by year 2. We rented a small co-working space, 2 desks, 2 chairs, 1 vision. Except maybe it was never quite equal. Avery's desk faced the door. Mine faced the printer. Clients started asking for Avery and her team. At first, she corrected them. Then she didn't. When we landed the Fieldhouse Hotel account, our biggest to date, it was because of my pitch deck. I spent 2 weeks researching competitors, calculating conversion rates, and crafting a custom rollout calendar. Avery presented it flawlessly, and we landed the deal. At the client lunch afterward, the project manager leaned over to Avery and said, "You're brilliant." Avery smiled. "It's a team effort," she said and raised her glass to the room. She didn't turn to me. That night, I stayed at the office late. The shared space was quiet dark outside the windows. I looked at our shared laptop, the one we'd started with now, a little scratched, covered in sticker residue. I opened our folders, reviewed every invoice, every tax form. My name was there, but it was buried. I didn't want recognition. I just didn't want to disappear. Still, I pushed the doubt away. This was my sister. This was ours. I kept working. The cracks didn't come all at once. They showed up as flickers. Clients who emailed Avery instead of our shared inbox social media posts that tagged Avery Ellis. Only a podcast interview where she described the company as my passion project. I called her once after a branding shoot to ask about a new client onboarding. She didn't pick up. An hour later, she texted, "Sorry, with Tyler, we'll call later." She didn't. I never mentioned it. But the next week, a new client signed on through Tyler's referral. He sent the intake forms directly to Avery. She sent me a screenshot. "Look what we got," she wrote. "Not look what you built. Not look what we're doing. Just we as in her and him." I closed my laptop, leaned back in the chair, and stared at the ceiling tiles of our rented office. It was 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday. I could hear someone vacuuming down the hall. Somewhere between the praise she received and the silence that followed, I'd become invisible. But I wasn't going to stay that way. Not forever. The first time Tyler joined a client meeting, I thought it was a fluke. We were scheduled to present a campaign rollout to a boutique skincare brand, one Avery and I had worked with since their second year. When I arrived at the studio, he was already there, slouched at the end of the conference table, laptop open latte in hand. Avery didn't introduce him. She just smiled and launched into the deck. When I asked later, she said, "He's just sitting in. He has a good eye for layout stuff. It's fine." I let it go. The second time he ran the meeting. It was a Thursday morning presentation for a wellness brand relaunch. Tyler handed out printed brand mood boards, carefully designed, fully formatted with a new tagline I'd never seen before. When I opened my mouth to ask where it came from, Avery touched my arm. "We wanted to surprise you," she said sweetly. "Thought we could get a fresh perspective in." "We, not me, not us, just we." That night, I stayed at the office late. Again, I pulled up the brand mood board Tyler had shared, looked at the metadata. It had been created 2 weeks earlier. 2 weeks, and no one had said a word to me. I didn't say anything either. But I started paying closer attention. The emails began shifting tone. Clients were CCing me less and less. Projects I had scoped and planned were now being streamlined under Avery's oversight. Tyler began introducing himself on calls as creative director for the Ellis brand. No one had ever given him that title. At first, I assumed it was just enthusiasm. He was marrying my sister. Maybe he wanted to contribute, but then came the rebrand. Avery Ellis Creative. The news site read, "Clean, minimal, stark black text against soft white." The photos were curated. The bio section included a poetic write-up of Avery's entrepreneurial spirit and creative vision, followed by a quote from Tyler about shared artistic values. My name wasn't on the homepage. It wasn't on the team page either. I found it buried in a footnote under creative support and strategy. No last name. Just Morgan. When I confronted Avery, she tilted her head like I was being unreasonable. "We're just evolving." "Morg," she said. "People recognize my name now. You're always saying you hate public attention. This just simplifies things." "This simplifies me out of existence," I replied. She laughed lightly. "Don't be dramatic. Everyone knows you're part of it. This is just better for optics." I looked at her. Really looked at her, and for the first time saw a version of Avery I didn't recognize. Or maybe I did. Maybe she'd always been like this, and I just hadn't wanted to believe it. The week after that, I noticed a line in our shared account ledger, LLC filing fees, but the name listed wasn't Ellis and Avery. It was Avery Ellis, Creative LLC. I hadn't signed anything. I called our accountant. She was vague. Said Avery had updated the records that the ownership distribution was in process and that I'd need to discuss it with Avery directly. When I did, she shrugged. "We were consolidating. You're not really into the paperwork anyway, right?" That was the moment I realized I was being edged out of my own company. Not loudly, not legally, not even with malice. Just quietly, strategically. Erased. The worst part was how reasonable they made it sound. Tyler called it a pivot toward marketability. Avery said they were streamlining decision-making to meet growth demands. But I knew what was happening. They offered me a new title, creative advisor. No ownership, no equity. Just a monthly stipend and an open invitation to weigh in when I had time. I didn't sign. They printed the contract anyway. It sat on my desk for a week, weighted down with a glass paperweight Avery had bought me years earlier, a smooth, clear orb with our initials etched in script. I picked it up one night and turned it over in my palm. The letters had started to fade. I placed it back on the contract and left the office. I didn't come in the next day. I didn't come in the day after that either. They didn't call. They didn't text. By the time the next client proposal went out, I wasn't even on the distribution list. It was strange. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just stunned. Like watching someone paint over a mural you spent years building and all they said was, "It was starting to look a little old." I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't ready to fight. Not then. Instead, I started saving things. Screenshots of meetings where I was replaced, emails with timestamps, a PDF of our original mission statement, the one with both our names. I scrolled back through my phone for photos of that first pop-up event, the contracts I'd signed, the trademark application I filed for our first tagline. My name was still on it. Tyler and Avery were smart, but they forgot something important. I never left anything undocumented. I never assumed I'd be remembered. So I'd built a habit of preserving proof. I created a folder on my desktop, named it something simple, just in case. I uploaded every receipt, every document, every early design mock-up with my initials. I backed it up to the cloud. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. But I knew they weren't going to get away with rewriting the story. Not all of it. Not without me. There's a moment after the shock fades when everything just goes quiet. Not outside that noise still moves, still clutters up your day. Emails come in, meetings happen without you. Invoices still get paid. But inside the voice that used to scream, "Say something. Fix this. Make them see you." It goes still. That's when I stopped trying to be heard. I didn't announce my absence. I didn't confront Avery. I didn't demand explanations or apologies. I just stopped showing up to a table I was no longer being served at. Instead, I got to work. It started with a phone call to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Elena Marsh, an old college friend who now worked in intellectual property law in San Francisco. We'd shared dorm walls, printer cords, ramen packets. Now she was 3 promotions deep at a firm that specialized in brand protection. She picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you," she said. I didn't waste time. I laid it out plain, how the business had changed, how my name had been removed, how the LLC had shifted, and how everything I'd helped build was being sold back to me under a new name. She didn't gasp, she didn't rage, she just listened. Then she asked a single question. "Do you have proof you created the original brand?" "Yes," I said. "Then we start there." That night, I sat in my apartment with a pot of coffee going cold on the stove, scrolling through 10 years of digital files. I opened folders I hadn't touched in months. Early, logo drafts, internal strategy decks, email threads from the first year I found the scanned copy of the original service agreement I'd written, the one we'd used for the first 20 clients. It had my name at the bottom, typed and signed. I opened a new folder and named it "In Case They Try." Then I started uploading. I dug into archived tax files and found the invoices from our first paid event, a tech retreat in the Columbia Gorge. My name was on the contract. The payment came through my bank account. I still had the deposit slip. I pulled the napkin from my keepsake box, the one with the original name sketch and tagline. The handwriting was mind-loopy and cramped from a caffeine-fueled night on Avery's old futon. I took a photo of it and uploaded that too. Elena told me to create a timeline. A list of key dates: when we filed the business name, when we launched the website, when revenue crossed its first milestone. I logged each entry with links to receipts and screenshots. I started tagging everything with keywords. contract ownership origin. It was the cleanest kind of revenge, not a loud confrontation, but a well-kept ledger. I filed to re-register the original business name Ellis and Avery under my name only. It had been allowed to lapse. Tyler must have figured the new branding would erase the need to renew it. He was wrong. I filed copyright for the first tagline we ever used, the one they'd continued recycling in their marketing, even after rebranding. I flagged examples where it appeared on their website and emails dated long after the copyright request was confirmed. Then I opened a new business account under a variation of my name, M. Ellis Studio. It didn't need to be flashy, it just needed to be clean, legal, and separate. I wasn't trying to rebuild what they'd taken. I was building something they couldn't touch. There's a strange peace that comes when the emotional dust settles, and all you're left with are facts. Not feelings. Not stories. Just proof. I wasn't trying to destroy Avery. That was never the goal. I just wanted what I'd built to be mine again. The name, the story, the work. All of it. They could keep their logo and PR launches and glossy influencer campaigns. But they weren't going to rewrite me out of the foundation. By the end of the second week, I had a full dossier: timelines, images, trademark paperwork, licensing violations, investor decks where my materials were repackaged but not credited. Elena called it a bulletproof history. I called it a receipt folder. Each night, I sat quietly with my laptop open and the window cracked, letting the chill in. I listened to the wind roll through the buildings and felt something settle in my chest, not anger, not even sadness. Just a readiness I hadn't felt in a long time. People think betrayal is a single moment, the knife in the back, the loud argument, the signature on the wrong line. But sometimes betrayal is the slow editing of your name out of the story, the casual omission, the missed credit, the we decided, the I just assumed. And sometimes power isn't in screaming about it. It's in documenting it. It's in watching calmly as someone rewrites the ending while you keep every version of the beginning. By the third week, I was done collecting. I printed out the first 5 client contracts, clipped them together, and placed them behind the napkin in my binder. That's when I renamed the folder. Not in case they try. Just they tried. The invitation came in the form of a forwarded email from a former client. "Thought you'd want to see this," she wrote. Attached was a digital flyer, white and blush pink with gold text. At the top, in clean serif font, it read, "Avery Ellis Creative Brand Launch, plus Investor Showcase. Hosted at the Haven Collective downtown, LA Wednesday, 6:00 p.m. Cocktails, 6:45 p.m. presentation." Below that was a stylized portrait of Avery, seated in a cream chair, Tyler standing behind her with a hand lightly placed on her shoulder. It looked like an engagement shoot dressed up as a press release. I stared at the flyer for a long time. I didn't forward it, I didn't screenshot it, I just closed the email and opened my binder. Then I called Leland. "I'll need you at Haven on Wednesday," I said. He paused. "Do you want to announce anything? File a claim ahead of time." "No," I said, "just bring the envelope." It was still light out when I arrived. I parked 2 blocks away and walked slowly, heels clicking across the concrete, like punctuation. I hadn't worn them in months. They were black, narrow, clean, the kind of shoes you don't run in. Outside the venue, valet attendants ushered guests out of town cars. Inside, champagne was already being poured into tall glasses by waitstaff in black uniforms. Everything was polished, surface perfect, all aesthetic. I imagined Tyler had coordinated every flower arrangement. I walked through the front entrance without checking in. No one stopped me. The space was all white walls, uplighting, and curated discomfort, the kind of place that looks better in photos than it feels in person. A wall-length screen displayed looping images of rebranded projects, some of which I'd once written the proposals for. Our first tagline flashed briefly across the screen, still in use. I spotted Leland at the back of the room near the sound booth. He wore a navy suit and held a sealed envelope in one hand, crisp and square. "Good timing," he murmured as I approached. "They haven't started." "Wait until they do," I said. At exactly 6:45 p.m., the lights dimmed. The screen shifted to a slide that read, "Building Beyond the Brand. The next phase of Avery Ellis Creative. Avery took the stage wearing a tailored white suit microphone clipped neatly to her lapel. Her voice rang out smoothly, practiced. We started this journey with nothing but a name and an idea. And now, thanks to your support, we're ready for the next chapter. Applause. Tyler stepped forward, all smiles, nodding to the back of the room like he was at a film premiere. That's when Leland moved. He didn't interrupt. He didn't speak. He simply walked forward and handed Avery the envelope. She looked at it confused, then opened it mid-sentence. Her eyes scanned the first page. And stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. Tyler leaned in to read over her shoulder. His face changed, not shocked, just suddenly pale, like someone who hadn't studied for the final because he assumed he wouldn't be tested. The room quieted. Leland turned to the audience and spoke clearly. This is a formal cease and desist. My client holds sole ownership of the original business name, the brand tagline and early-stage intellectual property that is still being used in Avery Ellis Creative's current offerings. Effective immediately, all usage must cease, or further legal action will follow. No one clapped. Someone at the back quietly stepped out. Avery tried to laugh. There's some confusion, she said, voice trembling at the edges. We'll resolve this privately. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. People started checking their phones. A few whispered. One of the investors I recognized him from a panel Avery had begged me to join. 2 years ago folded his arms and walked over to the screen operator. Within seconds, the presentation was frozen. Leland returned to my side. They've already violated the trademark, he said. We have the receipts, the contract evidence, and the emails. I don't want damages, I said quietly. I just want my name back. You're entitled to both, he replied. I know, I said, but I don't need both. Across the room, Avery was still holding the envelope. She looked toward the crowd, her practiced composure slipping like paint in the heat. Her champagne glass shook in her hand. Then she dropped it. The sound was sharp glass against tile, and it echoed. No one moved to help her. Tyler said something to her under his breath. She turned away. I stepped back toward the exit. My shoes didn't make a sound this time. The floor had become too crowded with silence. Outside, the air was cool again. The sun had dipped behind the buildings. I walked the 2 blocks back to my car with Leland beside me. Neither of us spoke until we reached the corner. You could sue, he said again. They used your material, your contracts, your tagline. You'd win. I nodded. But would I sleep? He looked at me, then nodded once fair. I opened my car door and turned to him. I never wanted to destroy anything I said. I just wanted the truth to show up. And it did, he said. It did, I repeated. I slid into the car and closed the door gently behind me. The venue was still visible in the rearview mirror, lit up like a stage that had forgotten its lines. I sat there for a long moment, watching nothing. Then I turned the key and drove away. The sun reaches my new office around 9:15 every morning. It slips in through the east-facing windows in long, even stripes, casting light across the pale wood floor and warming the edge of my desk. I keep the blinds open even on bad days, especially on bad days. The studio is quiet, not silent, but calm, the kind of space where thoughts can breathe. I rent the top floor of a restored Craftsman building just outside downtown Pasadena. It's not large, 3 rooms, 1 meeting space, and a tiny kitchen that always smells faintly like ginger tea, but it's enough. I named it M. Ellis Studio. There's no tagline. No font experiments, no rebrand launches. Just a clean brass plaque by the door and the hum of quiet work behind it. I don't need the rest. It's been 5 weeks since the settlement was finalized. I didn't post anything. No announcements, no statements. The paperwork arrived in a tidy envelope from Leland's office with the words, "Confidential." Stamped in the corner, I opened it on a Wednesday, sitting at my new desk with a steaming mug and a closed laptop. It was all there, the confirmation of full ownership over the original business name, the official transfer of the Ellis and Avery trademark, and a modest settlement check. I didn't cash it right away. Instead, I placed the documents in a folder I had already labeled months ago, Ellis and Avery closed. That's what this is now. A closed story. A closed door. Avery still runs her business. She kept the name, not the original, but the version Tyler shaped, Avery Ellis. Creative still exists online, still hosts pop-up events, still lands brand deals with curated coffee shops and tech wellness startups. But I hear whispers. Clients who come to me mention her name with a tone that's changed. She's not the villain. She's just someone they learned not to fully trust. It's strange how quickly people revise their perceptions once the lights come on. Last week, a package arrived at the front desk. I wasn't expecting anything, so I assumed it was for one of my designers, but the receptionist brought it in and set it on my table with a small note attached, "For Morgan from Avery." I didn't open it. Inside the envelope, I could tell from the weight, was a letter. Not thick enough to be an apology, not light enough to be casual, probably full of justifications, probably something about intentions and misunderstandings and how we got here. I placed it in the drawer to my left, next to the folder labeled Closed. Some stories don't need a response. Some answers come quietly in the form of moving on. I don't think about her every day anymore. That surprised me. I expected the silence to ache, but it doesn't. It feels clean, like air after a storm. There are reminders, of course. Sometimes I'll be reviewing a proposal with my team and I'll hear myself giving feedback she used to offer. Too many flourishes simplify the core message. The words sound different in my mouth. Sharper earned. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of our old logo in a client file or a Pinterest board. The one we sketched that night on my apartment floor, wine-stained and hopeful. I let myself look at it for a moment, then I move on. Closure doesn't mean erasure, it just means weightlessness. People ask me now if I'd do it all again. I say yes because I mean it. Even the pain, even the silence, even the cost of standing up when it was easier to stay hidden. It was worth it because I don't just have my name back, I have my voice. And I finally stopped needing anyone else to echo it. Yesterday, we installed a new wall fixture in the meeting room, a quiet art piece I commissioned from a local metalworker. It's simple. Just 3 overlapping arcs brushed steel and bronze intersecting at odd but balanced points. It doesn't demand attention, but it holds presence, like something that was once bent, then reforged. Underneath it, I placed a quote in plain font. "You do not have to be remembered by those who erased you." A client read it during her walkthrough and nodded slowly. "That's good," she said. "That's really good." I smiled and didn't say more. Because that's the other thing I've learned. You don't have to explain your piece. You just have to protect it. The invitation came on pale cardstock tucked in a matte gray envelope. Women Who Build Monthly Brunch, Plus Founders, Circle Guest Speaker, Morgan Ellis. Founder, M. Ellis Studio. At first, I almost declined. Not because I didn't want to support it, but because I wasn't sure I had anything to say. I'd never been the speaker. I was the strategist, the behind-the-scenes builder, the one who filled the gaps while someone else took the mic. But the woman who sent the invitation, Celia, a local artisan who'd launched a ceramic goods line from her garage, reminded me in her email, "You don't have to tell the whole story, just the part you needed to hear when you were me." So I went. The venue was a sunlit garden cafe on the east side of town. A long table wrapped in eucalyptus leaves and linen runners stretched down the center of the space. Women in every stage of business surrounded it, some in heels, some in sneakers, all balancing notebooks and hope. They handed me a name tag when I arrived. I smiled and slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't need it anymore. I spoke second after a web developer who shared her story about learning to price her services without apologizing. She was good, honest, direct. When it was my turn, I stood slowly and walked to the front. I didn't have a slideshow, I didn't need one. "I'm Morgan. I said I built something once, then I watched it get renamed without me in it." The group got quiet. "I'm not here to tell you how to build a brand or scale your reach. I'm here to talk about the part no one usually sees. The quiet part, the contracts, the registrations, the details you tell yourself don't matter, because the idea is what matters." A few women nodded. When I started my first business, I didn't care whose name was on what because I believed in shared vision, because I thought trust could take the place of documentation, because I loved the person I was building with. I paused, and then I got erased. I wasn't bitter when I said it, just steady. So here's what I learned. I continued. Never let a title replace ownership. Never let enthusiasm replace equity. And never assume the person you trust will protect what you don't. In the second row, a young woman was scribbling notes fast. She looked barely 22. Something about her, the slight hunch, the way she kept pushing her glasses up as she wrote, reminded me of myself. When the event ended, she approached me quietly, notebook pressed to her chest. "Hi," she said, "I'm Lila. I run a handmade soap company. It's small, but I needed that." "I'm glad," I said. "How's it going?" "It's going," she said with a tired smile. "My cousin does the website. Her boyfriend handles marketing. They keep saying it's our brand, but I do everything. And sometimes I wonder if I'm just a placeholder until they can call it theirs." I looked at her, really looked. She didn't need advice, she needed permission. I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim, linen-bound notebook, the same kind I used when I sketched the very first concept for Ellis and Avery. "I want you to have this," I said. "Start putting things in writing. Your ideas, your dates, your decisions. Don't wait until someone else tries to define them for you." Her eyes widened. "Thank you." She pulled a small post-it from her pocket and showed it to me. A business name scribbled in purple ink with a question mark. "This is what I want to call it," she whispered. I read it. "It's beautiful," I said. "Register it before you tell anyone else." She nodded like she'd just been handed a map. We stood there for a moment, the air warm with late afternoon sun and the quiet weight of understanding. Before she left, she glanced at my coat pocket. "You didn't wear your name tag." "I didn't need to," I said. And I didn't. Because the lesson isn't about claiming space with volume. It's about knowing what's yours even when no one claps for it. After everyone left, I stayed behind to help fold chairs. Celia came over with 2 cups of tea, handed me one, and sat beside me on the steps. "You know," she said, "we almost didn't do this series. We thought no one would show up." "They will," I said, "because this is the room where real things get built." She looked at me. "Will you come back sometime?" "If you need me," I said, "but I think they've got this." And they do. They're not just building businesses, they're building blueprints for the ones who come next, for the Lila who shows up next year, for the woman who hasn't been erased yet but already feels the silence coming. And maybe that's why I'm here now, not to reclaim the past, but to make sure someone else doesn't have to. It's a Tuesday morning in early spring when I find myself walking through downtown Portland, hands tucked into the pockets of a light jacket, wind brushing past the collar like a whisper. The city hasn't changed much. Neither have the sidewalks on this block, smooth in some places. Cracked in others, I step carefully, deliberately. Ahead of me on the corner of Fremont and Davis sits the cafe where it all started. The glass storefront hasn't been updated. Inside, the same mismatched chairs line the walls, and the chalkboard menu still lists lavender cold brew in slightly slanted handwriting. I pause across the street watching as a woman pushes the door open with her shoulder and exits, coffee in hand. For a moment, my body remembers. The hard metal chairs, the table where Avery and I sat 10 years ago, laptops open, our heads bent close as we sketched our first launch plan on a paper napkin. The way we whispered about what the brand could be. The nervous laughter when we booked our first paid client. How we split a bagel because we couldn't afford 2. I stand there letting the memory move through me like warm air, rising then falling again. But I don't cross the street. Not this time. I turn instead. Half a block down is a small tea shop I've passed a dozen times but never entered. The sign is hand-carved and simple, moss and fern. I'd always meant to stop in. I never had time before. Today I do. Inside the space is quiet. Pale green walls, wooden shelves lined with jars of loose leaves. A single barista stands behind the counter, steeping something fragrant in a small pot. She greets me with a soft smile, not recognition, just welcome. I order a white tea with citrus and ginger, then take a seat by the window. The cup arrives a few minutes later, steaming gently in a thick gray mug that fits perfectly in my palms. I hold it for a moment, just breathing in. Outside, the street continues moving. I open my bag and pull out the notebook I've been carrying for weeks. Clean linen cover, no logo, just blank pages waiting. I open to the first. For a moment, the pen hesitates. Then I write, I am not someone's second draft. The words settle across the page even and certain. There's a peace in that sentence, not because it erases what happened, but because it frames what comes next. I don't need to relive what was taken. I need to choose what I build now. I take a sip of tea. It's hot, bright, and sharp at the edges. I like it. Around me, the shop remains quiet. A couple in the back corner share a plate of pastries. A man with silver hair reads quietly from a paperback. No one is watching me. No one is waiting for me to speak. For the first time in a long time, there is no performance here, just stillness, just choice. Outside the window, the cafe across the street fades into the background of glass and brick. The memory that once pulled at me no longer has weight. Some stories stay where they happened. You don't need to walk through the door again to prove you've left it. I sit with the tea until it cools. Then I gather my things notebook tucked under my arm and step out into the light. The sun has climbed higher now. It catches on the window panes and flares gently against my face. I don't look back. I don't have to. This is the ending. But more than that, it's the place where something new begins. Not because I have something to prove, but because I finally stopped carrying what never belonged to me in the first place. Sometimes the deepest betrayals are the quietest, the ones that erase your name, your work, your voice without ever raising a hand. Morgan's journey was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming herself piece by piece until she no longer needed anyone else's permission to exist fully. She walked away, not because she lost, but because she understood her worth, no longer belonged in someone else's shadow. Her story is a reminder that silent strength is still strength, that being unseen does not mean being unimportant, and that letting go can be the most powerful form of closure. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us how you found your own clarity or subscribe to hear more stories like this. Stories that remind us we are allowed to choose peace over proving ourselves.